Hello and welcome to the Ideal Spaces podcast. I'm your host, Flora and Ulrich, and I'm joined today by my co-host and director of Ideal Spaces, Ulrich Gehmann.
Good to be here. Looking forward to our conversation.
Today we'll be talking to Tim Kaysers, a landscape architect and author whose work focuses on the climate, plants, and the natural world, all of which have ever-growing relevance in light of the climate crisis we are facing globally today. After studying landscape architecture in London and Berlin, Tim gained many years of professional experience whilst working in Ecuador and China before putting down roots in Lake Constance, where he's worked as a landscape architect since 2007. Through his work at Planstadt Zenner, a landscape architecture firm, Tim has been able to develop and implement in practice the topic of climate and green as part of urban planning, environmental planning, and landscape architecture projects. This work has culminated in Tim's book, Futur for Future, which was published in June earlier this year, where he explores the solutions that plants offer to us, the environment, and biodiversity. Tim, welcome to the podcast.
Hello to everybody. I'm happy to be here.
Well, it's great to have you here, and it's an incredibly relevant discussion to be having as countries and communities across the globe are continuing to tackle the impacts of climate change. So I think before we delve into the detail of that kind of wider issue, I'd really like to talk about how your fascination for nature and plants has developed throughout your career. Could you tell us a bit about what sparked that interest for you and how that's led to your desire to see more trees and green in cities today?
Well, as a child, I grew up in a very natural landscape or in a rural area. And I think this helped me to get a relationship to nature. And when I finished school, it was clear that I wanted to do something with nature and art. And someone advised me, if you want to combine these two aspects, then landscape architecture could be a good profession. So I started to study landscape architecture, and then I learned more about natural processes. And over the years, I got fascinated by the life of plants. And I realized a few years ago that the only living being on this earth which is really climate neutral, or with the beings which are sustainable, are plants. So in my idea, which I developed in the book, is that we find the solutions to our questions regarding these topics by the life of plants. And since that, I try to gather more knowledge about plants and about the natural environment. I'm looking forward even in the future to develop more and also to get to know more people who think similar. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting thing because everything depends on plants. That's my thesis out of the book.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, actually. I mean, I've lived in London my whole life and do feel like my contact with nature and plants isn't really what it should be. And I'm probably not getting the full impact of the benefits of plants. Could you quickly tell us how plants do help us, what positive effects they have, and what can we learn from them?
Yeah, especially, like I said, about sustainability. The main topic nowadays is the climate crisis. It's one of the planetary boundaries we are talking of, and it's a topic maybe most discussed about. And there are three things we need to consider in the future, which is the earth gets warmer. So we're talking about heat, the same way we talk about drought and flooding. These are the three main topics. And in nature or in history, the plants adapted to these circumstances. The climate was different and the plants adapted to this. For example, in heat, the plants developed the most perfect surface on Earth, which is the green, is the leaf, because it absorbs the sunlight, it uses the sunlight, and it creates a wonderful shadow, and at the same time it evaporates water. So and this water again becomes is changed into clouds, and the clouds create the rain, and it rains again. So they created their own climate, and trying to adapt with a strong sunlight on Earth. And this process is, in my eyes, the most fundamental process. It's like the photosynthesis. That's why I think plants are so important. And by the way, of course, in this process, they produce oxygen, which is one of the most important things for us humans.
Mm-hmm. May I raise a question regarding your concept of the green city?
Yes, of course.
We as human beings being faced with climate crisis in all its aspects, we still live in cities. We are, in a strict sense, no real part of nature, or at least in our recent history over the last 300 years, we are no longer part of nature. How the green city concept would fit into your general approach, also as regards plants and a renaturalization of human beings?
Yeah, I think, or my theory is that it's very fundamental. We are part of nature, and living in cities which are unnatural, I don't think we're going to have a future, because in the last centuries, we tried we turned away from nature, from the natural processes, especially in the cities. We seal the ground, we build buildings which are completely unnatural, and we are not, in the cities, the natural processes are not integrated, which means the circle of the water, and about air, about building up organic materials. These are the fundamental processes. And I think that we should change our city concept to bring back nature in the city. This will give us a lot of solutions regarding especially climate crisis.
And we use this term green city, but for the benefit of our listeners who might not be familiar with how that actually works, how do we create a green city? How do we get more nature into the cities we live in today?
Yeah, first of all, I think what I was talking about, the green, the foliage of the plants, that this is one of the most perfect surfaces on Earth which can cope with the climate. So in my theory, I think the greening of the city is very important, which means that all the roofs, they need a green surface. Nowadays, it's very easy to build green roofs, and it's very good that there are already many examples. And the second step is to green the facades, to have climbing plants or to have gardens on the facades, because the facades are, in area, they're even more than the roofs, because they're 4 times more the surface than a roof. So it's a big possibility to bring more green in the city. And third, we have the ground, the streets and the parks, of course, where we can integrate more green. In the future, I hope that the mobility will change, or this is very necessary, and we're going to have more space. If, for example, individual mobility or parking spaces are abandoned in the city, so we can create more green spaces and plant more trees, and then nature can come back into the city.
It's an interesting aspect. The more since as regards the concentration on topics on behalf of ideal spaces, we are concentrating on ideal spaces also as desired spaces for communities. And as regards the green city you outlined, it's a long topic in our Occidental cultural sphere, going back to the basic idea to reunite nature and culture.
Yes, indeed. I think my idea is not something unique. This idea is already developed by many other philosophers or architects in the past centuries. But nowadays, I think it's a little bit different, because before, maybe 100 years ago, it was more a longing for nature. And for example, famous is the concept of Ebenezer Howard about the Garden City, which were completely new concepts of urban planning outside the city. But in my idea, it's more like greening the existing city and let nature into the existing city. And it's also, I think, nowadays it's a necessity. It's a wish, or it should be an utopia or a longing for nature. We need more green. This is the only answer or solution for the climate crisis, in my idea.
I think that's absolutely right. There's so much talk really about taking different steps to help protect the environment, but really, you're right, we need action now, because, the more damage that's done, the more irreparable it is really. And I wondered if you could tell us a bit more about why now, but also, do you see there being challenges in that people are so ingrained in their urban ways of living with their dependencies on technology, man-made materials and so on? Is it going to be not impossible to make that transition or really take people on board with that new way of life?
I don't think so, because what would be the alternative? The alternative would be to find technical solutions to even turn further away from nature. And I don't think we cannot invent any machines or air conditioners or anything to really find a solution to the climate crisis. I don't think so. I think the natural processes are the most important process on Earth. We depend on it. And if we don't integrate them, we don't have a future. I don't think so, because we cannot live in a dome, like already examples were developed by other architects. Or it's also not a solution to fly on a different planet. We live on this Earth. It's a wonderful Earth, and we have everything we want. It's like fascinating what we have. We have drinking water, we have oxygen, we have fertile soil. And why should we destroy this, or why shouldn't we live with these processes and take the benefits from it and be proud of it?
It's a very interesting aspect and a fascinating aspect. Based on all that, if you want to design a vision, let's say, also an architectural vision, how your green city should look like, if you want to pin down an ideal city as a green city, as a vision.
I see the future city like a forest, because the forest is like the ideal natural environment, let's say, or the highest biodiversity we find in the rainforest, for example. And the forest is like perfectly adapted to the climate and to our natural processes. So what I, in my vision, see is like a forest city where the buildings are constructed like trees. And this also would be a solution to the sealing of the ground, because the trees, they only seal the ground with their stem, but all the rest of the surface is roots and soil and plants and living, where we can take benefits from. And like in the forest, the life takes part in the crowns of the trees. And in my vision, the same is in the future forest city, that the people live in the crowns and also have much more space there, because like in the rainforest, most life takes part in the crowns, and this could be the vision. But to get there, I suggest that we start with the greening of the city, and bit by bit, these tree buildings can grow within the city. But first of all, I also would integrate the existing buildings. It's not about demolishing the existing city. It's more about that the nature comes back bit by bit to the city, like spores, starting with the greening of the roof, of the facades, of editing new buildings on existing buildings, and like this, start the greening of the city.
If I may play a little bit the advocatus diaboli. On the other hand, human social space as built space is also pure architecture, at least in traditional terms. We have the plaza, we have the palaces, the boulevards, and so on. Also, it means pure architecture. How to integrate this traditionally, historically grown architecture, which also provides a kind of identity for the human beings living in a city, with your fascinating new concept of a city.
Yeah, that's of course very important to keep these cultural buildings and to also this history, to integrate it. And I think this is going to be the challenge to have a balance between the history and also the new architecture, because I think in my vision we will develop a completely new architecture. One of the very fascinating architects is the Belgian architect Luc Schuiten. I hope I speak his name correctly. He developed this utopia of the city végétale, which is like the vegetal city. And he's a real architect. I'm, let's say, only a landscape architect. So he really tried to design these green buildings, and he created a new architecture. And so I think it can be combined, the historical and also to create new architecture and new culture within the green city.
Absolutely. Ulrich was talking there about the importance of bringing history, bringing cultural traditions into these new cities. I'm also thinking about people, because a lot of that culture and history is very much ingrained in identity. And I'm wondering what kind of communities you see or you envision living in that kind of green city.
I think that it would be great if everybody gets fascinated again about the plants and the nature. I know there are many people who have they don't have the access to nature, but it's very important that we start with the children, that we try to explain them the natural processes and let them grow plants and let them play in nature to build up a new society in a way. And what I feel that many young people today, they really long for this more natural environment. They're not more interested in the capitalistic thought of having a house, a car, and all these things. They want to do something good for the earth. And I count on this new generation, which will maybe produce their own food in the future. This is also a very important aspect, that plants are self-sufficient, which means they produce their own food and their own energy. And I think this is a very important aspect for the green city, that we try to grow our own food within the city. First of all, to have a lower or to reduce the transport energy, and also to be more sustainable in a way, and to be more autark in a way of feeding yourself. I think it's very important that we are able to do that in the future.
It's a very interesting aspect also as regards the political consequences. I'm fascinated, as personally, I'm fascinated about your idea. It means also in practical political terms, it would mean an increase in decentralized communities and in an erosion of centralized political and administrative power we have been used to nearly all of our history as a civilization.
Yes, exactly. I think this is also important to have a kind of decentralization, because also nature, we have small natural circuses. Looking at the tree, for example, one big tree has a whole complete life, or creates a complete life by its own, and living in a complete own circle. And I could imagine that our communities or our quarters in the city are like big trees, and they are self-sufficient, but they are not isolated. They are still part of it, and they communicate and interchange within each other. This is a little bit different to the idea of the Greek idea of autarky. And I think in the future, it's going to be very important to communicate and to interchange, but also at the same way to be self-sufficient and create your own natural circle within your life and within your quarter or your community.
I feel like a lot of work has to be done to bring back that sense of community. And I think it probably does vary from place to place. But I think, especially living in a big city like London, there are so many people who are just out for themselves and, don't often think about other people. And I think actually to bring that back will be a crucial part of bringing also nature back into the city and building up this kind of decentralized environment, I suppose, where people can live.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure it's going to be a challenge, but I'm also sure that if we try to create this understanding with the people, I think we can fascinate them, because it is fascinating. And, starting up again to grow your own food, it's something very elementary and very different. And it would be a challenge to convince or to motivate everybody to do that. But in a way, not everybody needs to be self-sufficient. Maybe there are also people who produce for others, like the farmers in the landscape. We could have city farmers which produce the food for the people who don't want to grow their own food. But in a way, I think we don't have an alternative to get fascinated again of the natural processes of Earth and about this beautiful planet. I think this is the only way that we're going to have a future.
It's a fascinating vision. In Idle Spaces, we had a comparable approach, by the way. We presented it as the utopia we called it a terrace world, where on different terraces, different communities unfold, like your trees, with their own cultures, with their own urban agriculture. And on the other hand, these communities were interconnected. This is one aspect. There's a positive future in a positive meaning of an utopian drive, to envisage this future in realistic, makeable terms. On the other hand, what about the political resistance of the existing power structures and the related third aspect? What about our economic and technological system, as the very aspect Flora addressed already? The existing economic system will go down with this new concept.
Well, maybe I think we shouldn't make it let go down in a way, because we could profit from the good technical things. There are many technical inventions which are very helpful also. It's not about living again like indigenous people in the forest, because that's not going to be possible. But rather we should use the technical inventions which help us for our civilization, for example, to have clean drinking water, or to have solid structures, building materials, or very good communication systems. All these technical things, I think we could develop further, and they're going to help us. But some of the technical things, I think we can turn off, or we should replace them with natural processes, such as, for example, wastewater treatment, or to clean the air with machines. All these things plants could do for us. So it's a combination of our own inventions and technical modernization, and also, the natural processes. I think this is, we should integrate it.
This would be a good prospect, because I like your vision and I like this prospect for the future. On the other hand, we have to consider in very pragmatical terms the systemics and the existing systemics. The existing economic systemics are based on growth, on permanent growth. And this would collapse. Such a system is not viable now. It caused the crisis we are living in. And on the other hand, it cannot sustain without permanent growth. And this is opposite to the idea you outlined.
Yeah, but that's a very crucial point, because everybody knows that there is no permanent growth. And this is a real illusion, because in nature, nothing permanent grows. There's always a limit. And it's going to be essential that we acknowledge these boundaries of nature. And talking about growth, we shouldn't see it as like linear growth. We need to talk about circular growth. In talking about circulation, this is the growth of the future. It's a little bit the concept of cradle to cradle, which most people know. And I think if we change this term of linear growth into circular growth, into natural processes, we still can grow, and we learn and we can develop.
It's a very interesting aspect. Can you outline it a bit more, the circular growth?
It's about everything in nature. For example, there's no waste. Looking at the tree again, in autumn, the leaves fall down to the ground, and then there are bacteria and mushrooms which divert or change the leaf into soil, and out of the soil comes again the plant. And this is all growth and process and movement. And I think if we include these circular systems, or if all materials, imagine all materials being out of plants. In my vision, for example, everything, houses, cars, furniture, everything can be out of organic material. And at the end of its lifespan, it can be composted and become again soil, fertile soil, and we can grow something again out of it. So this would be the concept of cradle to cradle.
Mm. Do you think this kind of change comes from within a community, or do you think it comes from higher up, from governments, world leaders, systems like education? Because I just feel like people are so far behind. I'm sure there are communities across the globe who are already looking into these things. And I think we are making some slow progress. But I'm wondering where the change is going to happen from.
It comes from both sides. It's very important. We need a kind of bottom up and top down. Anyway, like Ulrich, like you said about the existing political system, they are there, and there are a lot of politicians which have the right concepts, and also like for example, in the Charter of the United Nations or the development goals, there are the right aims. Let's say the aim is already written down politically. The big question is how we get there, and this we need to talk about. And I think this comes from both from politicians, which give the framework. But at the end of the day, it comes from us people, like a grassroots movement, because we are the mass. We are many, many people. And if one person starts and tells the other person, they're already two, and so forth, I think we can change it from bottom up. This is going to be the main task and main challenge.
What could be concrete steps, let's say, for a bottom-up approach to proceed in the direction of your positive vision of a green city? What has to be done?
I think, first of all, everybody could start, for example, with greening their own buildings, their balcony, their space around them, and start to experiment and to grow their own food, for example, with urban gardening movements, which we find in all the cities all over the world, and to start again a relationship with nature, and to in a way to also to green your own thoughts could be a starting point for everybody to think about it. What can you do to green your own environment? And secondly, for example, to think about the consume, what kind of things I consume. Are they organic or are they artificial, and what kind of footprint they leave? So these are the first concrete steps everybody could do towards a more natural or a green future.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it is promising, actually. I know lots of local primary schools, for example, who are encouraging much younger children to think about, their impact on the environment, and are doing planting projects. And I think there is more funding available for those types of things. And I think it is a matter of changing the thought process more than anything, and getting people to stop and think twice. Do I really need to take my car 5 minutes down the road to pick up a couple of things at the shop? Could I actually get the bus, or could I just walk? It's those small things that will start to make a change if everyone understands and sees the benefit in making those changes.
Yes, I do agree. And I think thinking about the earth and all these things, it's much more satisfying, and will make you a more happy person, I think. And it's not about reducing our lifestyle. This sounds a little bit negative. I think it's more about gaining consciousness and gaining something.
there are huge well-being benefits that people probably don't realize, especially if you've been brought up used to living in the city, where you think your satisfaction comes from going for coffee or going to a museum or a gallery. That's true. They do bring people lots of enjoyment, but equally, nature brings a lot to people's lives that I think a lot of people don't really realize or give much time for. Perhaps during the pandemic, people have, in a way, been forced to spend more time in nature because museums, galleries, cafes were all closed. And I think through doing so, people have seen the benefits of spending time in those spaces.
Yes, exactly. For example, I lived a few years in Shanghai, and Shanghai is a really very, very urban city, let's say. And on the weekend, what they did is to go in a shopping mall. And from Monday to Friday, working the whole day, and the weekend going to the shopping mall. And maybe some people, they like this kind, but on the other way, there were complaining about that the air is not clean, that there is a lot of dirt on the windows and all these things. So in a way, if you tell them why is that, and if they have the chance maybe to, instead of going into a shopping center, they can go into the park or in the forest, and if they can feel or how good it is to be in a natural environment, I think it's very easy to motivate the people and to give them more awareness how important is the natural environment within a city.
For the idle spaces, it's a very crucial topic, this green city, and especially as regards the relations between community and space, and to make real new spaces for new communities with keeping the historically grown. So this would be my last point. Part of human identity in the city is the historically grown part of the city. First of all, they're designed as communal place, as a piazzas and so on and so on. And as Tim already addressed it, we have to find a balance between the city green and the city classical, in a positive sense of being classical, that pure non-natural architecture is also providing identity for the citizens, for the human beings. The museums, galleries, coffees, the piazza, the palace, and so on. And this could be a very, very big challenge for the future, because we cannot build everything from organic material, and we should not do it for this part of identity in classical terms.
I agree, but as I said in my vision, we could build everything on organic materials and in my vision. But we don't need to demolish the other cultural aspects of building, for example, with stones or natural materials. In a way, it's also good to use these natural materials. It's important that their footprint is in harmony with the natural process. So then I don't see any problems with also using other natural materials. But we should stop to create and build things and buildings with unnatural materials, which only cause waste and problems. So I think we are looking in the future at a new kind of culture. And in history, then maybe looking back, this time of lifespan where we used unnatural materials also is history, but we need to overcome this phase in our life and to begin a new culture which is more natural and in harmony with the earth.
Well, on that note, I think it's a good place to wrap up. As Ulrich has said, it really has been very fascinating speaking to you, Tim, about your concept, the green city, and how that's framed within that broader context of the environmental, economic, social concerns of climate change, which is such a concern today. And I agree that more than ever before, we do need to be looking at alternative models that will give humankind, a viable solution and a viable future. Thank you so much for sharing that vision with us.
Yeah, thank you, Tim.
Thank you, you too. Thank you.
And I would also direct any listeners who would like to learn a bit more about Tim's work to his website and his book, which is available to purchase online. I will pop the links in the show notes below.